So hello everybody, I'm Peter Techet from Vienna. I'm research associate at the Institute for Danube region and Central Europe. We are one of the oldest think tanks in Austria dealing with Central Europe, Southeast Europe, Eastern Europe. We are organizing together with the Campus Tivoli, former political academy of the People's Party, and the Karl Renner Institute, events on the parliamentary elections from our region. So today we will speak about the election in Kosovo, which will take place on 9th February. And I welcome also Gerhard Marchl from the Karl Renner Institute. He will welcome you also in German. We have also a briefing on the Kosovo election. You can see it on our website. It is also in German, so it's a multi-language event, but the discussion will be in English. And after Gerhard Marchl, I will introduce also our panelists.
Yes, hello, guten Tag, herzlich willkommen auch von meiner Seite zu unserer Veranstaltung zu den Parlamentswahlen im Kosovo. Mein Name ist Gerhard Marchl und ich leite den Bereich Europäische Politik am Karl Renner Institute, der Politischen Akademie der SPÖ. Ja, wie Peter Techet schon gesagt hat, es handelt sich um ein weiteres Mosaiksteinchen unserer gut entwickelten und schon seit Jahren stattfindenden Reihe vor Wahlen in Mittel-, Ost- und Südosteuropa. Und auch wenn der Kosovo ein kleines Land ist, so ist er doch auch für Österreich ein wichtiges Land. Ich erinnere daran, dass rund 30.000 Kosovarinnen und Kosovaren in Österreich leben. Einige tausend davon haben schon die österreichische Staatsbürgerschaft. Ich erinnere daran, dass das österreichische Bundesheer mit über 100 Soldatinnen und Soldaten im Rahmen der KFOR im Kosovo stationiert sind. Die Wirtschaftsbeziehungen sind gut, der Handel natürlich noch ausbaufähig, aber Österreich bzw. die österreichischen Firmen sind die 5. größte Investorengruppe im Kosovo. Also es gibt sehr enge und gute Beziehungen zwischen dem Kosovo und Österreich. Der Kosovo hat in den letzten Jahren aus unserer Sicht eine gute Entwicklung, vor allem in wirtschaftlicher und sozialer Hinsicht genommen. Freilich, das Verhältnis zwischen Serbien und dem Kosovo ist immer noch, wie wir wissen, sehr angespannt. Trotz eines Abkommens zur Normalisierung im Jahr 2023 bleiben diese Normalisierungsschritte aus. Im Gegenteil, es ist in den letzten Monaten oder Jahren immer wieder zu Zusammenstößen und Zwischenfällen gekommen. Und das ist sicherlich eine der Aufgaben der kommenden Regierung, natürlich gemeinsam mit der Regierung in Belgrad und den internationalen Partnerinnen und Partnern hier zu einer Verbesserung zu kommen. Ich bin schon sehr gespannt auf die Diskussion und freue mich, dass es wieder sehr hochkarätige Referentinnen, Referenten gibt, die zugesagt haben, an unserer Diskussion teilzunehmen. Dann möchte ich noch dem IDM und dem Campus Tivoli sehr herzlich danken für die Kooperation, für die gute Kooperation, die wir schon seit Jahren haben. Und damit darf ich auch schon zurückgeben an Peter Techet. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much for this introduction. So as I mentioned, we will have the discussion in English, but we have also a briefing on the election, which is in German. So although Kosovo is not recognized by all the EU member states, its domestic political situation is highly relevant to the EU's overall Balkan strategy. The key question is whether and how Kosovo, possibly even after February, under the current Prime Minister Albin Kurti, can normalize its relations with Serbia and thereby improve its chances of joining the EU. As I mentioned, I'm Peter Techet from the Institute for Danube region and Central Europe. I will moderate this discussion, and I would like to welcome our panelists. Vjosa Çerkini, a journalist from Pristina, working for Deutsche Welle and Mitteldeutsche Rundfunk. Konrad Clewing, a historian and a very well-known Kosovo expert, working at the Leibniz Institute for East and Southeast European Studies in Regensburg, and Hajdari, the Southeast Europe correspondent for Politico. She's also from Kosovo. First, I will briefly present the electoral system and the political landscape in Kosovo, and then we will discuss the political situation with particular focus on relations with Serbia and the Serbian minority with our experts, and also the audience will have also the possibility to have questions to our experts. So according to Kosovo's electoral law, the country functions as a single electoral district. All registered Kosovo citizens, including those living abroad, are eligible to vote unless explicitly excluded. Parliamentary elections have one single round in Kosovo, that is next Sunday, 9th February. The parliament in Kosovo has 120 seats. 100 seats are allocated through proportional representation, while 20 seats are reserved for non-Albanian minority parties or list candidates. Among these, 10 seats are reserved for the Serb minority. The remaining 10 seats are distributed among other minority communities, one seat each for the Roma, Ashkali, Egyptian, and Gorani communities, 2 seats for the Turkish minority, and 3 for the Bosniak minority in Kosovo. Kosovo's electoral law also enforces a gender quota, requiring at least 30% of candidates on party lists to be, as the electoral law says, of the opposite gender, which in practice means a mandatory quota for women. Voters can cast their ballots for a party list, but these lists are open, allowing voters to express preferences for up to 5 candidates. For both Albanian and non-Albanian parties contesting the 100 general seats, a 5% electoral threshold applies. However, this threshold does not apply to the 20 seats reserved for minority communities. Of course, they can have a seat with less than 5% of the votes. About the political background, the whole context. So as we know, Kosovo declared independence in 2008. However, not all EU member states recognize its sovereignty. It was in the former period a problem that 2 politicians from the European Union, from Spain and Slovakia, have been dealing with Kosovo from countries which don't recognize Kosovo. Now the situation changed. As a multi-ethnic and multilingual nation, the Constitution of Kosovo guarantees broad rights for minority communities, including the Serb minority, which has approximately 8% of the population, mostly living in the north part of the country. The first parliamentary election in independent Kosovo were held in 2010. For many years, the political landscape was dominated by 2 major parties, the Democratic League of Kosovo, LDK, funded by Kosovo's, let's say, father of the nation, Ibrahim Rugova, and the Democratic Party of Kosovo, PDK, which emerged from the former Kosovo Liberation Army, UÇK. Other main political forces are the left nationalist Social Democratic Party, Vetevendosje, I hope my pronunciation is good, so self-determination, and the Conservative Alliance for the Future of Kosovo, led by Ramush Haradinaj. Under the leadership of Albin Kurti, Vetevendosje, so the party Self-Determination, positioned itself as a left nationalist alternative, identifying itself as a social democratic party. It prioritized tackling widespread corruption and pursuing a more assertive strategy in EU accession negotiation, particularly regarding Kosovo's relationship with Serbia. In foreign policy, Vetevendosje adopted a more confrontational stance toward both Serbia and even Western powers, while advocating for closer ties with Albania. In 2019, the party of Kurtin Albi, Vjosa, won the parliamentary elections for the first time, forming a coalition with the LDK, with the Democratic League. This was the first government since the independence in which the PDK was not involved. However, tensions quickly arose between Prime Minister Kurti and the then President of Kosovo, Hashim Thaçi, from PDK. When Kurti attempted to declare a state of emergency due to the COVID pandemic in early 2020, the opposition, along with factions of the LDK, so the League of Democratic League, successfully passed a no-confidence motion against Kurti in March 2020. A constitutional dispute followed the no motion about the question whether President Thaçi could appoint a prime minister from another party. That was the reason because the Constitutional Court said 2014 that the prime minister should come from the biggest party, which was at that time, so 2020, the party of Kurti. But the Constitutional Court ultimately ruled 2020 in Thaçi's favor, allowing Abdullah Hoti from LDK to form a government. However, Hoti's election in the parliament was later declared unconstitutional, necessitating a new election. In the 2021 snap parliamentary elections, so the former election, Vjosa, so the party of Kurti, secured a historic victory, becoming the first party in the independent Kosovo to win an absolute majority of the votes. The previously dominant PDK and LDK suffered major losses, and Kurti formed a coalition government, including smaller parties, but also representatives of the Serb minority. So what are the main domestic and foreign policy challenges? We will talk also about with our experts. Kosovo's relationship with Serbia and its Serb minority remains a central political challenge, particularly as it affects potential EU accession negotiations. Prime Minister Kurti strongly opposed any compromise that could threaten Kosovo's territorial integrity. His administration has sought to assert Kosovo's sovereignty over the Serb-majority northern regions, where Belgrade-backed Serb structures continue to function like as a parallel system. In response to Western diplomatic efforts, Kurti met with Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić in Brussels multiple times. The EU and the US proposed a compromise. Serbia should end support for Kosovo's Serb-controlled structure without formally recognizing Kosovo's independence, while Kosovo should grant greater autonomy to its Serb minority through an association of Serb municipalities. But Kurti rejected the proposal, arguing that it would undermine Kosovo's territorial integrity. Tensions escalated around the April 2023, the municipal elections. Most Serb parties boycotted the municipal elections, allowing ethnic Albanian candidates such as Vjosa, Erdin Atić in North Mitrovica to win, despite extremely low voter turnout. This led to violent clashes in northern Kosovo in May 2023. NATO peacekeepers were attacked and injured by Serb paramilitary groups. In September 2023, similar groups attacked Kosovo police in Banjska, killing even an officer of the Kosovo police forces. Another attack targeted a water supply system in November 2024. Internationally, even Kurti has faced increasing criticism for the rising violence and the failed normalization talks between Pristina and Belgrade. In response, the EU suspended or scaled back several bilateral programs with Kosovo. Despite this, Kurti's hardline stance remains largely uncontested among Albanian political parties, even during the election campaign of this year. Kurti's campaign focuses on national sovereignty, anti-corruption initiatives, and social reforms. The PDK, so the Democratic Party main wheel, criticized the government's economic performance, promising a more business-friendly approach. Social policy has also become a key election issue, particularly regarding LGBT rights. Kosovo's constitution prohibits discrimination based on sexual identity, and in 2014, the Constitutional Court President affirmed that this guarantees marriage equality. That is also a question, what does it mean from a constitutional perspective? However, legal reforms to codify same-sex marriage rights have failed due to parliamentary opposition. In 2024, Kurti promised to ensure equal legal rights for same-sex couples, but his initiative failed to pass in the parliament. The right-wing populist coalition for the families has actively campaigned against LGBT rights, while the PDK and LDK remain divided on this issue. They are in the social politics more conservative parties, but they are divided in this issue. Kurti has publicly supported the LGBT community. He participated even in the Pristina Pride event last year. So the main parties, of course, Vede Vjosa of Kurtin Albi. This party is running in a coalition with the Liberal Alternative Party and Guksu, which was founded in 2021 by President Vjosa Osmani. Prime Minister Albin Kurti leads this joint list. The Democratic Party has nominated the mayor of South Mitrovica, Bedri Hamza, as its candidate instead of its party leader. The opposition party, Democratic League, has formed a coalition with the Albanian-speaking Christian minority party, PSHDK, with LDK leader as its prime minister candidate. Ramush Haradinaj's party, AAK, has allied with the Social Democratic Initiative, NISMA, and the Conservative List under the banner Alliance for a Victorious Kosovo. And the right-wing New Kosovo Alliance has partnered with the moderately, let's say, Islamist Justice Party, which is ideologically close to Turkey's ruling AKP party. Their coalition, named For the Families, oppose LGBT rights, as I mentioned. And the Serbs list, Srpska Lista, which is the main party of the Serbian minority, was initially disqualified from the election in December 2024 due to nationalist rhetoric, but it was allowed to participate at least at the election. The Srpska Lista, as I mentioned, is historically the main party of the Serbs, securing all 10 Serbs minority seats in the parliament. But the Srpska Lista now faces competition from other Serbian parties like the Srpska Demokracija, which advocates for a democratic and multi-ethnic Kosovo rather than strict alliance with Belgrade. Polling suggests Vede Vjosa, so the party of Kurti, leads with 47% support, possibly losing the absolute majority of the votes. However, Kosovo's constitutional requirement to include minorities in the government may allow Kurti to remain in power without needing a coalition with the other Albanian parties like PDK or LDK. Among the opposition, the PDK, so the Democratic Party, is expected to become second one, but with less than 20% support, followed by the LDK, Democratic League, and Haradinaj's coalition is likely to enter the parliament, while the coalition for the families may struggle to meet electoral threshold. So I hope I summarize in a comprehensive way the whole situation, and now we can open the discussion with our experts. So as I mentioned, Albin Kurti won the election 2021 with a huge majority, and it was the first time when other important parties like LDK, PDK lost a lot of support among the population, and Kurti has a good chance to become and to stay prime minister even the election. What is the key of his success? It is his strong stance toward the European Union and the Serbian and Serbia, or it's more the domestic politics which makes him so popular among the Kosovo people. So what is the key element of his success? Maybe we can start with Mrs. Çerkini, because you are in Pristina.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and you explained everything in detail. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with Mr. Clewing and also Ms. Hajdari and all of you. It is really important to mention that Kurti got so much support from Albanians and from Kosovars in general, because he was, he's an example of a politician that is not corrupt. And this was one of the key points that he got so much support in the previous elections 4 years ago. And he was voted so much from diaspora people, but also from Kosovars here in the country. But yesterday I was part of the Welle campaign, or election campaign in Ferzai, where Kurti was there. And I see that the presence of people was not so much as it was in the previous elections. And even when I speak to people now after 4 years, 4 years ago, every second person that I spoke, they were really enthusiastic about Albin Kurti and Vjosa in general, but now I don't see so much support when I talk to people. So a little bit he lost supporters in the country due to his policy, because he didn't achieve to fulfill all the program that he mentioned 4 years ago. And he is using even, for example, yesterday he mentioned during the election campaign in Ferzai that they brought stability and safety in the north of Kosovo, and he's using basically most of the time only what they did as a government in north of Kosovo. And because they don't have so much to show to the people from the other aspects, like from health field, or for example from other promises that he said. For that reason, they are using mostly the rhetoric of safety and stability in the north of Kosovo as the biggest success in this elections, for example. And we have also a diaspora, a strong diaspora that is coming from Germany, from Austria, Switzerland, and all over the world. Now this year we have around 105,000 diaspora Kosovars, if I can call them like this, that are registered to take part in the elections, and which the number is basically less than it was 4 years ago. And I think this time when we have the elections, we will see that the result is not anymore the same, because people are disappointed. And even the sanctions that EU decided to regarding Kosovo is also another problem. And I see that also the politics, the relationship between diplomatic relationship between Kosovo and US is not anymore the same. Even yesterday I heard, for example, Kurti saying that during these 4 years, the relationship, the diplomatic relations between US and Kosovo were the strongest, and which I don't see this normally as a journalist and also as a citizen of Kosovo, because we see now Trump is in the US as a president elected, and even now we have, for example, reactions of Grenell regarding the Kosovo government, which I think if Kurti will win the elections, they will have a little bit not easy to communicate with each other. And I see very different developments now, and let's see now after the elections which the situation will be. But to be honest, even when I went yesterday with a German colleague to see the election campaign, I didn't saw a lot of people in the center of Ferzai that supported Kurti, which tells a lot about the situation. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, we will talk also about the relation to the Trump administration in US, but let's stay by the question why Kurti is still popular, because in the polls he is still leading. So maybe Dr. Clewing could say some words about the reasons of his popularity, and also from a historical perspective, what kind of party this Vjosa is. So it is a left nationalist alternative, it is a social democratic party, it is a nationalist responses to the former foreign policy of Kosovo, which maybe was too moderate towards Serbia and the European Union. So how would you contextualize the success of Kurti and this party in Kosovo?
Well, the electoral success is largely based on national politics. Okay. One other field where he surprisingly well, surprisingly to me, is that most people that I know say that corruption has declined. Almost all that road building and responsible for that. So maybe those are two fields: national sovereignty, the former is a national sovereignty defender, and in
One issue, we can hear you quiet. We can't hear you really good, so maybe it would be better without the headphone. I don't know.
It's
Yes, now it's better. Yes. So
I don't hear you, but okay. Let's
now it's perfect.
So the basic aspect of this success is national politics, I would say, and the earlier governments indeed were very tactical in terms of their, one could even say, obedience to international advice. For instance, not to apply for NATO membership or not to apply for EU membership because of problems of on the part of the NATO and EU, which had and have members that do not recognize Kosovo, as you said in your introduction. And this tacit tactfulness was giving way for people to be unhappy with those approaches, I think. The US had a big deal in turning down the first Kurdi government. And many people really had the impression that nothing was moving in the right direction in terms of perceiving and pursuing national sovereignty. And national sovereignty is a major political topic, in contrast to what many Westerners think, because Serbia really is a political threat to Kosovar independence. This is almost always downplayed by international factors, but Serbia has the stance that Kosovo is not even existing, but there should be a Kosovo and Metohija as being an autonomous province of Serbia instead of that. And they don't say that's their aim, but the government still says that this is what is on the field. And so the whole dialogue was arranged by the EU was largely based on a false assumption that the two parties which had basically an understanding that both of them existed or had a right to exist were dealing with topics. So I think it was a very quite understandable attempt to introduce a larger degree of Kosovar sovereignty in that field, not only in the north, but also vis-a-vis the partners. But on the other hand, the whole approach is quite confrontational, as you also said, and has largely harmed Kosovo's relationship with those partners. And Kurti has also certainly not perceived one part of his earlier program, that is to enter into a strong dialogue with the Serb minority. So the performance is quite mixed. And just to be short on your answer, what kind of party that is, I think it is a national, a left wing, more or less typical left populist party. But as it is working under special conditions in this country that is not fully recognized, it is not fully typical in some of its aspects. Sometimes it's more radical or more focused on national identity than the left populists would be. And I don't see much of classical social democracy in it, but maybe better for the experts and journalists to judge about.
Thank you much. So, Mrs. Hajdari, maybe you can also describe the party of Kurti. which kind of party it is and why the other parties who dominated the Kosovo politics, like LDK and PDK, failed in the popular votes by the former elections.
Hello, Peter. Hello, everyone else. You gave such an extensive explanation of everything at the top that I feel like there's not much left for us to say. But to answer your question directly, I think we should really go back to the 2019 and then 2020 situation in Kosovo, which you touched upon briefly, which is why it's very important. When Kurti first won the elections in 2019, Vjosa won by such a landslide because the atmosphere in the country was such that, people were very much fed up with PDK. They were very much fed up with them being in power, them being widely associated with corruption. And as both Konrad and I believe Vjosa mentioned, being perceived as parties that were very open to. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I got some feedback. Parties that were very open to basically directly taking diktats from the West in the way that they should behave and conduct both domestic and regional and foreign policy. And so Kurti was by many people perceived to be a massive breath of fresh air. Then in 2019, there's this crisis again of Vjosa being unable to form a government because all the other parties, especially LDK, the only one they were considering forming a government coalition with, were sort of dragging their feet in insolence or in sort of because they were so felt so. They built their entire identity as being both LDK and PDK as being establishment parties, whereas Vjosa was this perpetual protest party. And I think that angered people a lot, being drawn into a protracted crisis. We get a government is formed, we get the COVID pandemic starts, and then the government and the opposition parties then decide to launch a motion of no confidence in 2020, sort of placing their own party interests ahead of what would be sort of national interests at a time of crisis. This might seem like, far back and irrelevant to these elections, but it really contributed to this feeling in the country that Vjosa was the only party that cared about the people. And then in the repeat elections after that, Kurti won by such a landslide that he didn't even need a governing coalition apart from the list that was that joined him with Vjosa Osmani, the president. And so this in the 4 years since then, the opposition parties have tried to completely change their images, like figures that were a big deal in 2020, like former Prime Minister Isa Mustafa, or former President and Prime Minister Hashim Thaçi are almost entirely forgotten. One of them has largely left political life, while the other is part of the trial, war crimes trial in the specialized chambers in The Hague. And so these other parties are now trying to find ways in attacking Vjosa from all sides in an attempt to sort of claim some of the anger of the citizens with things that haven't been done in the last 4 years. But still, Vjosa has and grasps this perception of the population that they are an incorruptible party, as Vjosa said, but also one that'll stand up for Kosovars locally and abroad. EU integration is not something, even though Kosovo is a very pro-European, what is pro-EU, because I guess everyone's pro-European because they're also part of Europe, but they're a very pro-EU country. But EU integration is such a far off and non-tangible, sort of non-concrete concept for Kosovars because they don't understand or see the benefits of it in any kind of even, medium term. So they don't feel like crucial aspects, as Konrad said, of national identity, national sovereignty should be violated in their perspective for EU integration. So I think this is what makes Kurti really popular. He's also, his strategic use of crises in the north of the country, his standing up to Vučić in particular, have made him popular, to be completely honest, not just amongst Albanians. He's very popular in Bosnia, a country that also often, has both internal and foreign policy struggles due to the politics of current entity president Milorad Dodik, former country president Milorad Dodik, and Serbia proper, and so they see Kurti as being one of this rare group of Balkan politicians that have been able to push back against a hegemonistic Serbia in the region, and push back against what they see so I'm talking Bosnians, to some extent Montenegrins, and even to some extent Croats, who see the EU as kowtowing to Serbian power and influence in the region. So I think these are the reasons why he's popular. I mean, I hope we can get to what about his policies didn't work out in the last 4 years, but this is really the recipe to their party still polling so well.
Yes, thank you very much. And as Dr. Clewing mentioned, the other parties showed obedience to the Western powers in the recent times, and maybe that is the change Kurti introduced in the Kosovo politics. So, Mrs. Çerkini, how do you see in Kosovo the perception of the Western powers? Is there a disillusionment about the behavior of the Western powers toward Kosovo? It is really the key issue for the voters supporting Kurti, that he is more strong even toward the Western powers, supporting the idea of a sovereign and territorially integrate Kosovo?
Yes, definitely. This is also a narrative that Vjosa is also using to get the support of the voters in these elections, mentioning always the sovereignty and also all the actions that they took in the north of Kosovo. And as I mentioned before, I even yesterday saw that during the speech of Mr. Kurti in Ferizaj. And of course, when, for example, the Western politicians, they are saying that Kosovo took few decisions one-sided when it comes to the north, and they just decided to give sanctions to Kosovo regarding this. Sometimes Kurti is also saying that they are doing everything right, and that EU basically is being one-sided, and everything what they are doing are also always in the same political line with EU and all the foreign supporters or Western countries that support Kosovo. And the same thing was also last year, for example, the debate when it was the discussion about the Ibar bridge in the north, where they said that they're going to open the bridge, and after all the discussion and even with reactions of EU politicians and also US politicians, at the end Kurti said that we will not open the bridge. So basically they are using all this narrative for the next elections, and sometimes Albanians, not only Albanians but also Kosovars, they feel basically represented by Kurti, because he's using always this rhetoric that we are protecting the whole territory of Kosovo. And even yesterday he mentioned millions of euros that they will invest for the Ministry of Defense, and also he mentioned a lot of drones and everything that they ultimately that they will definitely buy in the next mandate if he wins the elections. So basically this was the whole rhetoric that I even saw yesterday, and through the whole actions and the discussions that we had last year, it was always connected to the north. And definitely this impacted also the opinion of Kosovars, and for this reason they are supporting even now Kurti for his decisions regarding the north.
So, of course, we'll talk also about this special relation to Serbia and the Serbian minority, but maybe we can say some words about the other parties, PDK, LDK. They were the most important parties in Kosovo, even before the independence of the country. Why did they lose so much support among the peoples, and what kind of policy they are staying for in this election campaign? So what are the key messages for the voters, PDK, LDK, and maybe we can speak also about the AK, the party of Haradinaj. So Mr. Clewing or Mrs. Hajdari, who would say something about the other parties?
Konrad, please go ahead first.
Thank you. Well, my impressions are probably rather superficial and based on the impact that some of the campaigning events left on me when I was watching them. One part of their decline is certainly the fact, to my mind, that Vjosa is the only party that is organized and very efficiently organized. If you watch the campaign events, the inscenation of their event is of Vjosa is everywhere the same, and it is strictly organized upon a scheme, singing the national anthem, which is the national anthem of Albania, and some other hymns or songs adding to the topic, adding to the atmosphere what they want to incite or stress as an aim, and while not speaking very much on that in that regard, they don't explain this iconography, but I think everybody in Kosovo will understand approximately what they mean by that. Whereas the others, I'm maybe too fond of or impressed by the flags that were displayed, and maybe I give too much importance to them. But at a PDK event, you will see also the Albanian flag, which is virtually the only flag which is displayed in the Vjosa campaign. And at the PDK, you would see some Albanian flags, some American flags, no European flags, and also KLA UÇK flags, some, and also some flags. So they tend to be display, and I think also in their speeches, to depict a more pragmatic and more reliable with regards to the partners approach, and say that they would invest in 1,000 things, and they even, but also the other parties, which is a basis weakness of the whole campaign, I think, of making promises, what they will invest in Gilan, what they will invest in Ferizaj, and so on and so forth. And I think nobody should really believe that those figures have ever been calculated. So by anyone of them. So I'm a little bit worried, I mean to say. I don't want to comment on all the parties individually, but I think the atmosphere has changed in regard to earlier campaigns, in that regard that it is more confrontational. All the parties have been fined for using hate speech in public appearances against each other. And I have the impression that if one can say so, the very confrontational political atmosphere from Albania has now largely been indirectly, probably, adopted by Kosovo parties. And I think that's one reason to be rather worried about, and to, and not a very pleasant signal for the future.
Are you also worried about Kosovo politics regarding the campaign events and maybe the outcomes, so that the atmosphere became more and more nationalistic and also hate-rated?
I mean, I'm more worried about the North, primarily, but we'll get to that topic. Konrad is right in highlighting the confrontational nature of the relationship between Vjosa and virtually every party in the country. Albin Kurti is a very intelligent, but also very arrogant. And when I say arrogant, he takes no prisoners when it comes to criticizing his opponents in ways that rile them up. He has had this particular skill even when he was in the opposition. For example, LDK, who, I'm talking about campaigns since 1999 or 2000, when Kosovo started organizing relatively free parliamentary elections. LDK would spend one round of campaigning criticizing PDK, but then would, still end up forming a government with them, or vice versa. These are parties that have the same applies to AAK and AKR and the other newer parties that you mentioned in your very extensive opening. So all of them are capable of working with each other, but almost entirely unwilling to work with Vjosa, and a lot of it has to do with the way that Kurti has approached politics himself, both as an opposition leader, but also as a prime minister. I find that, like I said, he was burned by LDK very publicly. Let's not forget that LDK members have, since the no confidence vote, openly said that they were pushed by Richard Grenell and the American government to launch a no confidence movement. This was something that Kurti was alleging at the time as well, but that they wouldn't admit to. And so he does not trust them. He doesn't see them as being the same kind of political cloth. That doesn't mean that everyone who's in his party is incapable of corruption or inefficiency in governance. He just sees he believes that he operates on a different level from all of them, and that arrogance really puts everyone off. So that's why I think the rhetoric is really confrontational. But also, like I said, since the last elections, all these other parties have been on a soul-searching mission, and they know that they're not. Vjosa is the original sort of left-wing nationalist product. They can't sell the same thing. Also, a lot of them are, especially LDK and PDK, are center-right parties. And more socially conservative in many ways. So they can't replicate what he's saying. So the only way to position themselves is to push for platforms that are the complete opposite or diametrically opposed to what Kurti insists on. So that's I think the reason for the tension. And with regard to like interpersonal escalations and Konrad's worries, I don't that Vjosa people will happily get into a fight. Activists, I'm not accusing the party of anything, because Kurti is someone who, and his members are very quick to come out and defend themselves. They have a very strong online presence. I have definitely been the victim of their attacks online several times, and as have been other journalists anytime they've been criticized. So I just want to make that disclaimer in case someone was listening. But no, Vjosa activists would get into confrontations with PDK, supporters and stuff like that, especially outside of Pristina, but in Pristina as well. So that tensions are there for sure. I think Kurti is pretty confident that he's still going to win a landslide of some sort. And first of all, and the second thing is, I think he knows how to handle a possible coalition. I don't see a party right now that would be naturally coalescing with him, especially not LDK leader Ljubomir Abdijico has literally built his entire identity as being the opposite, the anti-Kurti. Same goes for PDK. And so I don't know who the coalition partner would be, but I think right now he's trying to get a landslide of some sort or majority. As you know, we can have minority governments as well, and you highlighted that too. But make sure that he's going to get back to power without anyone else. And especially not the Serbian minority parties.
Thanks that you mentioned the Serbian parties, because yes, that is the Srpska Lista, which is the most important Serbian party, and it has still absolute position among the Serbian voters. It's only due to the parallel structures financed and supported by Belgrade, or what is the reason that the Srpska Lista is still so popular and important among the Serbian voters. And another question regarding the other Serbian parties, because now we can see that there are alternative lists like the Srpska Demokracija and so on, and they are trying to criticize even the Belgrade aligned policy of Srpska Lista. So can we say something about the Srpska Lista and about the other alternative Serbian parties? Maybe they have more chances also regarding the demonstrations in Serbia, Belgrade, Novi Sad.
For the first time since, if I can briefly.
Yes.
Sorry, I'll give
everybody can speak, so
yeah.
I'm not a teacher, so if somebody has something to say, then you can.
For this first time since Srpska Lista got formed, remember this was after the 2013 agreement on local elections, which saw the Serbian party get formed basically by Belgrade. I can't remember if you said that in your introduction, but I'm highlighting that now again. Srpska Lista is, for the first time since they got formed, I actually could consider a situation where they might not win in every municipality. And they might do well in places like Štrpce, Ranji Lug, so locations, cities, towns, villages, areas, municipalities, sorry, south to the south of the Iber River, which is this traditional divide or very common divide between the Serb majority in north and the Serbian enclaves in the south. So they're going to do, I think, quite well in the enclaves again, but maybe in the north, somewhere it could slip, their support could slip because of these two main new parties that have been formed, Srpska Demokratija and Srpski Narodni Pokret, or the Serbian national movement. And because of what you said, the anger with Kurti's continuous escalations has led to a bit of a popular movement among the Serbs, which was very uncommon in the immediate post-war, post-conflict and post-bombing period. And apart from Oliver Ivanović, who, as we know, was killed because he was perceived as being in opposition to official Belgrade policy. They, Aleksandar Senijević, their leader, constantly has also built an image of confronting Kurti. He has spent the past couple of weeks every time.
He's from the Srpska Demokracija.
Yes. He's an activist and he's running in the elections as well. He's organized a protest anytime Kurti or one of his members of government has come to the north. He's been arrested more times than I think he himself knows as a result of that. And so he kind of, I think, has a lot of support in the north as a result of that, especially amongst sort of, let's say, the Serbian, Kosovo Serb civil society. Srpski Narodni Pokret is also present in the other municipalities, but I still don't think, sadly, I think Serbian voters are always in their minority position of the Serbs in Kosovo has been such that because of a precarious financial situation and not that many job opportunities, especially for those who do not speak Albanian, and or few opportunities for Serbian speakers, a lot of them see employment opportunities only via the channels applied to them, party channels that come from Srpska Lista holding municipalities in the country, and so they will vote for them in most cases. So I still think they'll come out first, but they'll have a challenger for once. Not all 10 and or 11 seats in the minority sort of a group of Serbian minority group of seats might go to Srpska Lista, which would be a massive thing. I do still think that most Serbian parties will vote on major issues, constitutional issues that require a double majority. I think they'll still vote together, though.
And also, Tim, do you think that maybe the demonstration in Serbia can have an impact on the Serbs voters in Kosovo, breaking also the hegemony of the Srpska Lista, or it's another issue for them?
What we should mention is definitely that in the last 2 weeks, we had even protests of Serbs, Kosovo Serbs, against Vučić in North of Kosovo. This is something new. We never had that before. And this tells a lot how even people in the north are also affected by the protests of students in Serbia. And what we should definitely mention is that all the Kosovo Serbian parties that are now participating again in the elections, that tells a lot about a little bit progress that we had when we just compare them with the local elections that they boycotted for at least for the last 2 or 3 years. And now we have again the Serbian parties that they are part of these elections. And but what we should mention definitely is that, for example, we know that Lista Srpska was always on the same political line with Belgrade. When Una also mentioned Aleksandar Arsenijević, which they have a new initiative, also party in the north. They were also against Kurdi, but sometimes they criticize even the politics or the political line with Belgrade. And for that reason, they got so much popular in the north and also got a lot of supports even from the Western countries, the US embassy and all the embassies in Kosovo. But what I see that in the last months, they are also being on the same political line with Belgrade. So basically, it's impossible to be, as a Serbian Kosovo Serbian politician, to be totally independent from Belgrade impact, basically in the north. And this is also definitely something that we should mention. But it's good that we have also another party, and we don't have only Lista Srpska. We have also other initiatives and parties that can a little bit give the Serbian voters, Kosovo Serbian voters, another alternative or another opportunity to vote somebody else if they don't feel, for example, represented well by Lista Srpska in Kosovo. And this is a positive development when it comes to the north. And yes, if you have other questions, we can also speak about that.
I would like to add a little bit on that. Actually, first of all, I would like to stress the fact that already said that all the parties will remain in direct lining up themselves with Belgrade politics, regardless what will happen in Belgrade now. Nobody can foretell what is going to happen there with the government. I would rather say that I still don't believe that Vučić is going to fall down very soon, but who knows, might be. But there's no, except for the current minister within the government, Goran Dragić, or not Goran, but Dragić.
No, Drašić.
Drašić, yeah. Sorry, Goran Dragić is by the Srpska Lista. He's one of the really few handful of people I've ever heard speaking Albanian very fluently, but has no influence, it seems, among the population at all, among the Serbian minority population, I mean. And all the parties that exist are aligned with Serbian, the Belgrade approach, and probably necessarily also. One needs to take into account how tiny this minority is, and that there's hardly any demographic basis for an own elite from Kosovo among the Serbs, and they are frightened by what Kurti did and the government did with placing the state presence on almost only the police presence, which is a reasonable thing from security point of view and a sovereignty point of view, but it's still frightening for the Serbs in the north, I would say. And almost everybody from among Kosovar Serbs who would say, okay, we don't only have to accommodate somehow with the presence of the Kosovar state, but we call the state our state, and Serbia is just a kinship neighbor, would be exposed to not only to direct threats and to economical problems, but also would be reproached as being a traitor. And I think this is something maybe that Kosovars, Albanians, I mean, could somehow understand, at least in the regard that getting detached from national points of view, in this case, Serbian points and stances, is very difficult, also in psychological terms and in their relationship with other Serbs from Serbia, from Kosovo. So I think the Kosovo Serbs are really in a very difficult position within Kosovo and vis-a-vis Serbia, but won't be able to detach themselves from Serbia for the time being.
I would just,
Yes,
sorry.
both you.
Okay. It's difficult to be detached from Serbia, of course, because they are, Serbia is part of their identity. But we have also another example of Kosovo Serbs living in other municipalities, like in Sturce and in other municipalities that are not in the north, but in the other sides of Kosovo or other parts of Kosovo, and they are very well integrated. What means in the north, it was always a propaganda that, for example, the Albanians are attacking them or something like that. Of course, that always, when it comes to political decisions, Kurti should be on the same line with KFOR, and because they are responsible for the north, for example, for the safety. And we should always try to involve and also to integrate the Kosovo Serbs in our institutions. Sometimes they don't want to be integrated, and we need always to be together with the EU and also US in order to have progress slowly. We know that it's difficult for few to accept that Kosovo is independent, and they just don't want to accept that. But on the other hand, they have Kosovo passports, or they are also getting salaries from Kosovo. They are also developing projects and all this stuff. That tells a lot when we have in the other parts of Kosovo Serbs that are collaborating, being friends, and also do business, like in Brezovic area, for example. We have many people that have even businesses together, and everything is working perfectly. The main problem is that before all these attacks happened in the north, like even the Banjska attack, or even several months ago, it was also another andere attack in the north, which tells how fragile is the situation there. But for that reason, we have both countries' representatives, and they should sit together and continue the dialogue, because without the dialogue, they can't achieve anything. One-sided decisions are not good even for the safety, but also for the future of not only the Balkans, but even in Europe. And we have, sometimes I always say that Kosovo Serbs sometimes are like a punching ball from both sides. And but they should also decide, do they want to be like integrated, and we can't force them to be integrated in the country. It's like we gave them the opportunities. We have other example of Serbs that are living very freely and working together with Albanians. And we need just to be realistic and not let the propaganda from both sides like just dominate the public discussion, and just be realistic and see even in the north that the situation now is not that they are threatened. The police is for everybody there, and they arrest people that do crimes, not people that don't do anything, like random people. And sometimes this is the approach that even few Kosovo Serbs have, that they say that the police is there to attack us or something like that. They are repressing us, like even for example, my family and other Albanians experienced that in the 90s, which is not the same, because basically the police and also special units that we have in the north, they are there for safety of each citizen there. And we need just to define this rhetorics and also propaganda, what is true and what is just a propaganda from the other side. Thank you very much.
I wanted to say something. No?
Yeah, I feel like once we get started talking about the relationship between the Serbian community and the majority communities, that's gonna, as always, garner the most cause for debate when it comes to Kosovo. But I think really just wrapping up what both of them said, which is, but adding on the fact that there has been no single government in Kosovo, both prior and well, definitely not prior, but especially after independence, hasn't been able to, no government, no international initiative by either the UN, who are still officially, Kosovo's international legal tender representative, as long as Resolution 1244 is active, or the OSCE, who is very present despite not recognizing Kosovo's independence, or the EU, who have invested a lot of money in this, or the US. Name everyone who's ever been involved. Nobody has been able to promote a healthy democratic spirit amongst Kosovo Serbs, one that gets them out of the pathos of the perpetually victimized minority. Now, this sounds, for me, it's very worrying to perceive a minority in that way, because minorities are protected and they will universally be and should be in Kosovo. But what is very sad for me, as someone who's very closely followed the Serbian minority in Kosovo for years, is that there isn't, even opposition members like Aleksandar Asenijević, who's been, been on talk shows in Belgrade and in Serbia over the past couple of months as these incidents have happened and stuff like that. He, while being critical of the general ephemeral Belgrade, on their approach to Kosovo Serbs, which usually takes on the form of they have abandoned us, they're not taking care of us, was not openly critical of Vučić. And for me, this is an indication of lack of a healthy democratic instinct amongst the Serbian minority in Kosovo, which is basically a failure of every single international project that has been, a bigger international initiative that has been targeted precisely that. There isn't a clear understanding amongst Serbian voters in Kosovo of active citizenry. There isn't an active understanding of citizen participation, an understanding of political platforms, even amongst the Serbian parties, are very flat and usually either in the more nationalist extremes talk about Kosovo becoming part of Serbia again, and the less nationalist extreme talk about legitimate concerns such as Kosovo's perpetual violation of the law on languages. Kosovo officially on paper should offer Serbian in every single municipality in the country, since it is an official language of the country. It does not do that, largely, to some extent in some municipalities because of a lack of interest, and others because there's a lack of people who speak Serbian at this point. Those numbers that, let's say, used to exist in the pre-war, pre-conflict era. And so I think a key, I would as a private citizen, be really interested in a party that had a clear idea about how it would provoke this democratic instinct amongst the Serbian citizens, while also provoking a greater understanding amongst the Albanian majority of their role as the majority population in integrating the Serbian community. This is something that is very completely not taken root, again, despite it being a main talking point amongst the international presence in Kosovo and all the money and the funding and everything that has been happening over the years. God knows I've been to like thousands of events and dinners and closed, sessions trying to consider how this would happen, and it hasn't happened so far. And I don't see a party that offers that even in this round of elections. And so perhaps, again, I think the reason why Kurti is the most dangerous, we can pivot away from the Serbs, is precisely because he, while officially, he tries to speak, makes a point of speaking Serbian in press conferences and replying to journalists in Serbian, overt sort of ways of showing that he is the prime minister of a multicultural country. But on paper, he has created more of a confrontational relationship, precisely because, he claims it's a confrontational relationship with Belgrade and the Serbian List Party, but a confrontational relationship with the minority. And I think really that is the challenge and the reason why the EU and the West are really not interested in having him back. I hope that makes sense.
And as Dr. Clewing mentioned, the Serbian minority is still, we can say, relatively tiny minority in Kosovo with demographic
But that doesn't matter.
etc.
It's a condition of Kosovo's
Yes.
independence. conditions. It's an absolute
Yes,
condition of
that's
Kosovo.
why what I'm trying to say, that maybe the problem is that the whole issue with the European Union is still depending on this issue with the Serbian minority and with the relation to Serbia. So that would be maybe a question to Dr. Clewing. There's a general question how it is possible to have negotiation between two sides where one side is not recognizing the other side, the very existence of the other side. So how could and should the Western powers reinforce the Serbian recognition of Kosovo as an independent state? Should it be the main issue of the negotiation? Because now there is, as you mentioned, there is this problematic situation that two parts are negotiating, but one part doesn't recognize the very existence of the other parts. And how could we deal with this issue, and should we deal with issues? So should the Western powers be more radical in this question by not allowing Serbia to have negotiation with Kosovo without recognizing the state?
Well, I think to expect Serbia to formally recognize Kosovo as a state is rather unrealistic and shouldn't be expected to happen in the foreseeable future. But I think, as you somehow suggested in your question, that the Western allies, let's say so, of Kosovo, in their perspective, they should, in the Kosovo perspective, they should be able to be regarded as allies because they help the country to come into being. Those Western powers should advance a much more pragmatic and stance that would not overfraud the bilateral talk with expectations. I think many things from the experience, experience tells that the two partners, which are no partners actually, which are unwilling partners, most notably Serbia, will not be able to reach a bilateral understanding on many things. And it would, and I find it quite amazing that EU was not ready to take the Ukraine crisis as a warning sign to, in order not to allow those non-recognizing countries any longer to blockade the EU and US in NATO with a NATO approach to its Kosovo. So Kosovo, it is a contradictio in adjecto, I think, that the European Union, who performed as one of the supporters of Kosovo state building after the war, is not openly saying that that the state is there and it should be there. They still pretend that they have a status neutral approach to those talks, which is outragingly stupid, I think, and damaging in terms of pragmatic approach that should be undertaken. So, it is damaging for the Western stance, and it is also damaging for return to the Kosovo Serb minority for the whole issue in the field. I think, and I'm somehow diverging from Una in that regard, and I think Kosovo would be much better understood as an Albanian or Kosovo-Albanian state project, where the minorities need to be protected, and some of the non-Serb minorities are, as a matter of fact, very well protected in terms of law and many other things that can be done on the minority protection level.
And this protection should mean also some kind of territorial autonomy, because that was a proposition of the US and EU, that to form some kind of alliance of Serbian municipalities in the north part of Kosovo, and that is something against the territorial integrity of the state.
Well, if I may give a short answer on my part, I think it was a big mistake by all the Kosovo governments not to act upon the ruling of the Constitutional Court that said that the alliance of the Serbian communities cannot be accepted as it was, but it could be adapted to Kosovo's constitution, and none of the governments acted on that in that regard for, I mean, 9 years or so, almost 10 years by now. The ruling was in 2015, as far as I remember, and I think that's again quite amazing to see that non-action is taken for action in such an urgent topic. But define the autonomy on a territorial level as something which is given in South Tyrol, for instance, also should firstly, if it was adapted as a model, should firstly be restricted to the north, which it isn't. So because the internationals say that the autonomy should apply to all the Serbs, which is unlogical in a way. Stripte and the utmost south should certainly not be out of a territorial autonomy of the Serbs in Kosovo. And so that's one part of my objection. And the other is that since Serbia is not recognizing Kosovo as a state, territorial autonomy doesn't make sense in the true sense of the word. There may be elements of territorial autonomy regarding the north, but if the north had a real autonomy, it is quite obvious to my mind that the state sovereignty there would be not only limited, which is logic within an arrangement of autonomy, but also be highly in danger, if you remember what happened in Bansko and so on. So the territorial element of autonomy should be very restricted and if present at all. And but the cooperation level of among the Serbian communes should certainly be allowed to and given a chance. My point of view.
Now you would like to say something?
Just a quick reply, again, on the definition of Kosovo as a country. We just really should not forget that that Kosovo became an independent country under very extraordinary circumstances, ones that have been continuously abused internationally, mainly by Russia's Vladimir Putin, and that the only condition under which the report by Marti Ahtisaari was accepted by the UN General Assembly, the only condition under which EULEX, the EU Rule of Law Mission, was sent into Kosovo to help with the transition of the judiciary and now mainly in police forces, and the only condition under which NATO forces still continue to act in the country as Kosovo's de facto army are if Kosovo maintains a multicultural element. Now, whether or not this works on the ground is an entirely different debate, and I agree with Konrad there. I mean, you were the one who, in your opening statement or in your earlier statement, talked about the Albanian flag being present in all the rallies of the political parties, and that is precisely because, how many years after independence, and almost 25 years since the NATO bombing, that Kosovo has been stifled or prevented from having a strong Albanian identity. But this is sadly not something that, resonates with, we haven't even gotten to the Trump State Department, but with the State Department in general, the previous administrations, it does not resonate well in Brussels because, they're constantly thinking of other precedents that are used in, let's say, non-recognizers and in internationally in opposition to Kosovo's independence. And realistically, I think it's a little ignorant of Kosovo politicians when you know that this is going to be something that is constantly going to be used against you. It is flat. It doesn't go, and it's not fair, especially considering what Serbia does on a daily basis, how Serbia treats Kosovo, how it blocks it on but if anything, the ongoing Ukraine invasion has taught us that very few things are fair in international geopolitics. And I think it's my main criticism of all Kosovo parties, as I said earlier, is their inability to somehow make the Serbian issue less of an issue. And now I'm not saying that's easy, because Serbia will always use the Kosovo minority as pawns, and the Kosovo Serb minority also know that they're only relevant, if let's say the territorial reassignment or exchange of territories that was debated in Thaçi's last mandate and to some extent supported by some voices in the U.S. and even by Federica Mogherini at a certain point, the former high representative for foreign policy of the EU. The moment the North would become part of Serbia, Kosovo Serbs in the North would become irrelevant in Serbia, because then they're not a bargaining chip. And so this is also a reason why the Serbian political parties in the North have the views that they have, as long as they are the perpetually targeted minority and the victim of terrible Albanian terror and so on and so forth, be it police terror, as Vjosa mentioned, something that's talked about a lot. They lose all political relevance if that is changed. But again, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a challenge that should be undertaken by a very forward-thinking, progressive, open-minded Kosovo political party. And the main criticism of Kurti has been that he has decided to do the complete opposite. He has decided to have the most confrontational approach to minorities. And sadly, voters are reacting to that, because Kosovo Albanians are sick of having, how many times has the government vote, the confirmation vote for a new government, been held up by a Serbian minority party? How many times have budgets been held up by Serbian minority parties? How many times have the Srpska Lista intentionally blocked sessions of parliament where important policy needed to be passed? And so, these are the issues we face in this election. And Kurti and Vjosa having positioned themselves as the party that won't let Srpska Lista push Kosovo around certainly resonates with the voters, but doesn't resonate with Brussels and the US and other European capitals at all.
Thanks. We're approaching the end of our quite interesting discussion, but I will have one question, maybe even two. So, as Dr. Clewing mentioned, there is some kind of neutrality of the European Union toward the Kosovo question, and I'm asking Ms. Çerkini that maybe this kind of neutrality of the European and Western powers can lead to anti-European, anti-EU turn in Kosovo, like we can observe in countries like North Macedonia and Montenegro, where the people are a bit tired with the non-perspective of joining the European Union.
The neutrality definitely is always the best, because they should not be one-sided, supporting much Kosovo or supporting Serbia more.
Okay.
We need just to be realistic. Even the European representatives or politicians should just be in the same line with facts. Kosovo is independent, and NATO intervention was due to what Milosevic regime did to Albanians in the 90s during the war. And I was also just 5 years old during the war, so I experienced everything, and I know how much we suffered, basically, even my family and the whole people during that time, and how difficult it was, like just to lose jobs and to experience so much during the 90s just because we were Albanians. And this is also a fact. So even when the Western countries decided, or basically NATO countries decided to do the intervention during that time in the Balkans, it was not without a reason. So basically, this country supported Kosovo to exist as a sovereign country, and all these are facts. We have always we have even now non-recognizers countries even inside of EU.
Yeah, Slovakia, Spain, Romania.
Slovakia, Spain, but Spain and other countries, this is not the reason that they don't want to recognize Kosovo, because Kosovo is existing, and even Kosovo Serbs, even Albanians, foreign countries, and everybody should just accept this fact, because we are existing. And we need just to be realistic to see that Kosovo is a democratic country. Kosovo fulfilled much more criteria or expectations from EU than every other country in the Balkans. All these are facts, and we are also fighting corruption. And we can criticize Kurti and everything, but at the end they just removed all the parallel structures in the north. That
we accept this. Even we accept these facts. There is still these facts also that some parts of the European Union don't recognize Kosovo. So is there some kind of disappointment among the Kosovo population about the behavior of the European powers? Or
Yes. When we speak from the population aspect, definitely yes, because people think that they are supporting Serbia when they know that they were the aggressor, not Kosovo, and this is the reason why people feel that they are disappointed, and they are like just being sometimes supporting much more Serbia. But my opinion is that the neutrality was always a part of the EU policy, and definitely should be. And without EU, without US, Kosovo definitely cannot be such a democratic country. And our future is definitely just being part of the EU, and this is the best way even for all Balkan countries.
And how could change this? How could change this neutrality with the Trump administration? So it would be maybe even a less neutral neutrality. Maybe
Trump,
yes. Others they can say also something about the possible outcomes with the Trump administration. Yes.
Trump supports Kosovo independence. We need just to see how we should decide as Kosovarians who will be in our government and represent us on the best way to keep the strong relations that we have with US and in Europe in general. And this is definitely the best way to have strong supporters and also good representatives in the country.
Yes, maybe small answers from the others about the possible outcomes with the Trump administration toward Western Balkans and especially Kosovo.
So I would love to give Una the last word and therefore comment.
I want to do the opposite. I talked so much. Please, Konrad, you can.
No. I just want to a short comment on what I meant by the neutrality issue. I don't think that the Western partners of Kosovo and Serbia to some should be non-neutral in arranging talks or so. But being neutral on the issue whether Kosovo exists as a state or not is a fatal error on their part, I think. They accepted, for instance, to call those talks between Pristina and Belgrade, which is nonsense. They should call Kosovo a state, and they should regard that it is as they act as recognizing indirectly, because the EU is not in a position to recognize a state, but they should not leave any doubt about the existence, as you said, Çerkini, of the state as such. Only then could the two states talk to each other on a rather equal level. That was what I meant with my anti-neutral approach. And with regard to Trump, as I said, I will be very happy to listen to Una on that issue. But just to say that nobody can foresee right now what will happen there. I mean, Trump and his family, even his family, has been invested in Serbian issues. They have invested in Albania. They have not yet invested in Kosovo. But I think it's very difficult, if not impossible, to foresee what they are going to do. But what can be said is that not taking the U.S. stance into account during last year, as the Kurti government did, was a very hazardous game, because nobody can tell what the reaction of the next government of the United States will be to that. So that is my point, and possibly it would be good not to be too hazardous in that respect.
Agree with the neutrality part. So I'm not going to go into that due to time constraints. But I'm very worried about the Trump administration. Remember, it was the last Trump administration that led to Kosovo's government, Kurti's government, being toppled, and it was always at times of crises that they like playing a little bit stronger hand. As we know, Richard Grenell also likes playing a stronger hand in the Balkans and putting his as Americans say, his thumb on the scale for people and projects that he is involved in. And the investments in Albania and Serbia are very troubling. While the Kushner and and Ivanka aren't going to be part of this administration, it seems they are certainly going to be having a relationship with current Prime Minister Edi Rama if he stays Prime Minister, and Vučić if he stays Prime Minister. But my bigger worry is that PDK has a strong relationship with Grenell and a strong relationship with Trump. Remember, by some weird twist of fate, the same prosecutor that wrote the indictment against Hashim Thaçi is the one who led the case and wrote the indictment against Donald Trump. So now they see Jack Smith as seen as like a common enemy by both parties, and as PDK tries to reestablish itself, maybe it even hopes in some way that it can have, because the US is one of the main financiers of the court in The Hague. It's not just the EU, of these specialized chambers. And so I think that PDK are hoping that Trump will put his finger on the scale when it comes to the outcome of the verdict in the Thaçi's trial. I don't think they'll be successful, but they'll certainly try. And I think that PDK would hope to do better in these elections so they can, if PDK wins, I think they would have a very pro-Trump perspective and a very problematic, and usher in sort of more influence, more of the Trump influence in the country. So I personally, that worries me very much, in case, as a journalist, I'm not allowed to sort of vouch for any party over the other, but I think with PDK, that would be a big problem.
Thanks. And now in the last round, really with short answers about the possible outcome of the election. So we can say that Kurti wins the election, he can stay at the power, or maybe it's still possible that all other parties can form a government against him, even if it is, as I know, not constitutional, because the biggest party has always demanded to form a government.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah.
The president plays and has played a large role in past elections where it was a bit more of a complicated situation in granting the mandate, as again you highlighted in your very extensive opening, that Thaçi played an intense role in not giving the Kurti government a chance to form a new government after the reshuffle. Vjosa is still formally aligned with Kurti. There have been cracks in their relationship in the past couple of years. It is unclear whether, depending on where she sees her own political future, if she sees her future as someone who will run again after her mandate. The presidential mandate is longer than that of a regular parliament, so she's going to stay in power for at least another year. And whether or not she sees herself as being aligned with Vjosa again, or going back to her own party, or doing her own, list as she has done several times in the past. She could grant the mandate. I mean, Vjosa, unlike Thaçi, is more by the book kind of person, so I don't think she'd play obvious favorites. But if it's very tight, what I predict will happen is that Vjosa will get the chance to be the first to form a government. If they fail with the votes in parliament, then the second round, I think also according to the law, I always forget, every 4 years also has to go to them again, but with a different candidate. And the third time you can suggest a different party or the second place party. So it'll be something, along those options, unless Kurti goes in, somehow manages to form suggest a new government immediately in a coalition with another party. But I really don't see that happening.
Yes.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for listening.
Yes, thanks. Maybe Çerkini.
Thank you. As I mentioned even in the beginning, Vjosa definitely will win the elections, but they will not get so much support that they had 4 years ago, and they will build the government together with minorities, which it can be not a strong government. Next year we have even the elections for president, and if Vjosa don't get more than 50%, it's definitely very problematic to achieve that next year. So that means we will have always difficulties if the new government will be strong enough. The second scenario, I would say, is from the opposition parties to have a new government with them, and then this can change a little bit, of course, the situation in Kosovo. But we have these two scenarios, basically, Kurti and minorities, and the opposition parties altogether. And I don't know how the developments, political developments will be, but after the elections, we will see that and just wait what will happen. But definitely it's going to be always, we will have new developments, and I'm very curious to see the results on Sunday. Thanks.
Yeah, the curiosity also applies to me, and also the two. I would also subscribe to the two scenarios that you also have developed, and I just want to add one tiny bit of thing, which is of some importance to my perspective on the field. And we have hardly mentioned it in our discussion, but you did, Peter, before. The opinion polls show that the, let's say, Turkey-related party, Justice Party, or the Coalition for the Family, is most probably not going to have success. And given the fact that many people here, even within Kosovo, the influence of Turkey, or have for a long time stressed the ability of the Erdogan government to exert some restricted but still present influence, I think this is a very interesting probable outcome of the elections, that we are still talking about verfeindete parties, the parties being enemies to each other, as we stressed, but still all acting on the level of either Kosovar or Albanian, in a way, secular self-conception, and that is something that deserves to be stressed. And I want to do that as a final word of my part.
Yes, maybe Kosovo will be the only country in Europe without a right-wing populist party in the parliament.
And also that.
So thank you very much for participating in this very interesting discussion. I hope the audience enjoyed also the discussion. So you can find more information about our upcoming events at the IDM together with our partners on our website or newsletter, together with the Campus Tivoli and the Karl Renner Institute. Our institute will be hosting another event on the elections in Germany on 20th February, so you're warmly invited to join us there as well. And thank you very much for participating. Vielen Dank fürs Zuhören und für die Teilnahme. I was Peter Techet from Vienna, from the IDM. Yes, so it's not finished also for the YouTube, so